Today I'm reviewing a 45 square meter or 500 square foot apartment in Warsaw, Poland. It's a pretty creative space that's been very liberal with patterns and colors, and I want to show you what works well in here and what doesn't. So let's check out this apartment and see what's inside. So right when you enter this apartment through the front door, you're met with this full height cabinetry and a zebra patterned veneer. It definitely catches your eye right from the beginning, and it gives you a bit of a hint of what you're going to find inside, where things get progressively more bold. Now, for the door frame of the front door, they've gone with this deep green marble with a pentagon sort of cutout at the top that I think was a nice touch. And I honestly don't know if this red light above the door is something that's required so the apartment meets fire code, or if it's just something that they added on their own, but either way, it looks good contrasted with the dark marble around it. Now, I can't say I necessarily like being hit with such a busy pattern as soon as you enter the home, because it means you can't relax in here in the way that most people would like to at home. But I'm going to keep an open mind here and see what else they do with this apartment. But I'm also seeing a functional issue as soon as we get in here, because the floors here are micro cement, which is not the same as concrete. First of all, concrete floors are usually 5 to 10 centimeters thick, but micro cement is just a very thin coating, something like 2 or 3 millimeters. And that's a really important distinction because micro cement is porous, and if it isn't sealed correctly, then moisture and dirt are going to grab onto it. And remember, this apartment is in Warsaw, where they've got long winters, so you're going to be tracking snow and rain and mud inside. But unlike the polished concrete you might expect to see in an apartment like this, micro cement can get very beat up in just a matter of weeks. So if it were me, I would have went with a polished concrete floor in here instead, which is way more durable. Or they could have gone with a terrazzo with a very light hint of color, which would have both been more durable than the micro cement they've got here, and also tied in with the rest of the apartment. Because, as you'll see, the owner clearly loves color, and so just having a tiny sparkle in the floor, I'm sure would make her pretty happy. Now, there's also nowhere to put your shoes here, but I'm assuming in one of these cabinets there's a place to store your boots, and ideally something like a drying rack where you can put your wet shoes when you come in from outside. And just to your left when you walk in is this reflective door to the bedroom, and then straight ahead is a door to the bathroom. Now, generally you wouldn't like to have the master bedroom right next to the entryway like this, but given that there's just one woman and her dog living here, and they're only working with a footprint of 45 square meters, which is under 500 square feet, they don't really have a lot of options. The good news is that they do have 3 meter or about 10-foot ceilings in here, so that helps the space to feel larger than it actually is. Okay, now let's shift to the dining room, which is kind of just the same space. Again, in such a small apartment, there's not a lot of opportunity to have distinct rooms, and so having the dining room right in the entryway is a sacrifice that the homeowner has had to make. Now, one thing you could do here is, instead of creating an entirely separate room, you can just create a separate dining zone, which you can define by using a new paint color on the walls, or to keep it simple, just a rug underneath the dining table and chairs. Because it's so small in this space, I actually think a rug would just overwhelm the space, but it's something you could consider in your own home. So if you need to separate zones like your kitchen from your dining room and you're not quite sure how to do it, just placing a rug around the dining table that's large enough for all the chairs to sit on when they're pulled out is a really cost-effective way to do that. Now here, they've gone with a coral pink terrazzo pedestal table that adds quite a shock of color into the room, but I actually like it. Forgetting about the zebra veneer, we haven't had any strong colors in here so far, so this totally works. And the chairs are pretty interesting as well. These chairs are actually based on Bruno Rey's 1971 design, which was the first mass-produced chair with no visible screws that locked together kind of like puzzle pieces. And those chairs went on to become one of the most successful industrial furniture pieces of the last 50 years, and so placing them around this table isn't just an aesthetic choice that balances out the heaviness of the table, but it's also a quiet nod to European design history. Now, above the table, they've gone with this stacked paper lantern pendant that's going to cast some really nice soft light in the evenings. It's hung pretty low here, around eye level, so they're really trying to create a moment around this dining table, which is fine, though if you want this light hitting more of the room, you're going to want to raise it up so it casts its glow further. So between the 1970s chairs, the terrazzo table, and this paper pendant, the mood in here is playful and a little retro, but it still feels modern and clean at the same time. And honestly, I'm impressed that they're able to pull off multiple different areas in here using the same pieces of furniture. Okay, now let's look at the living room, which again is in the same space but manages to define its own little nook. And you can see from here how the dining room sits just inside of the entryway, and the TV here is actually mounted on the bathroom wall, which I'll get to in a minute. But first I want to talk about this console table under the TV, because it actually looks pretty good in this space. Again, because the only other pop of color you see from this angle is the terrazzo table, and I think this can work. It's a very bold emerald green, but not to the point of being overpowering. But what I don't like is that it's not very functional, because because of its curved design and lack of drawers, they can't use this for any storage aside from a couple of books. So it may look good, but I would have opted for a more functional storage solution here and probably went with something more like a mid-century style sideboard that would have fit this corner perfectly. Because in a small apartment like this, storage is always an issue. But with that said, I think they have done a couple things right here. First, they went with an olive brown modular sofa to keep the palette on the major elements in the room more restrained. Second, these dusty rose curtains match really nicely with that sofa and with the burgundy tones coming through the coffee table and the vase and flowers sitting on it. And then under that coffee table, there's this chunky cream knit rug that also has a nice neutral tone. The problem is the rug is too small for this room. The coffee table is on there, but because the front legs of the sofa aren't, the rug kind of looks like it's floating without a purpose. So they definitely should have went with a larger rug so that at least the front legs of the sofa can sit on it to give this room a bit more weight. But still, I appreciate that they went with a chunkier rug here because in the winters, these micro cement floors are going to get cold. So having something to warm up your feet in the living room is important. Alright, so now as we get into the kitchen, which again is right next to the living room, the first thing that catches your eye is this back wall with this full height walnut burl veneer. It's so warm and you can see how the light hits it from the window that just gives it this natural gradient, so you know it's going to change as the sun moves throughout the day and throughout the year. And they've gone with handleless cabinetry to keep the wood pattern uninterrupted, but at the same time they've managed to build in a stainless steel oven to give it even more functionality. This is a huge win in this apartment because they've managed to put not only the appliances in here, but also a ton of storage in a kitchen that's pretty small on its own. Then the other cabinets along the right side here are done in brushed stainless steel, which looks really sleek and reflects a lot of light around the room, but it's also going to show fingerprints and micro scratches pretty easily, so it won't look this good in 6 or 12 months. Now, they've got a pretty tiny sink here, and they've added a backsplash behind it, which I appreciate instead of leaving this bare white wall exposed, but to be honest, the material on the backsplash looks pretty cheap to me, and I think they would have been better off going with something like a simple white subway tile. It would just elevate the material palette in here a little bit more and feel more in line with the rest of the kitchen. But what I do love that they've included in here is the breakfast bar next to the window. It's really only big enough for a maximum of 2 people to sit, but because the homeowner is living here alone, it's the perfect spot for her to open the window, enjoy her morning coffee, and look out to the gardens beyond. This might seem insignificant, but it's actually really important because you always want to make sure that you build in these little moments of utility into your home. So that means when you're buying or remodeling, you want to think about what specific activities will I do in this part of the home? Because it's so common for people to have entire rooms in their home that they never really use. But even just a tiny space like this one, a table next to the window, I'm sure she'll use it all the time because it's got a defined use and it's executed really well. And I should also point out something else that we've been seeing throughout this apartment, which is that the colors in this place come from the objects, not from the surfaces. And you can see that perfectly throughout this kitchen. We've got another one of these red lights that we saw in the entryway, so that confirms that it's not a fire code thing, but it's actually part of the design. They've also got these ceramics next to the window, the salt and pepper grinder, and this deep green vase that all inject some color. But the important thing is that the surfaces themselves don't. Yes, this burl veneer and the zebra veneer in the entryway do bring in some unique patterns, but these aren't colorful surfaces that shock your eye and steal your attention. Instead, all the color is coming from the furniture pieces and the decor. Now, to get to the bedroom in here, you go back through the entryway and underneath that zebra veneer wall. And the dominant feature in here is this deep purple lacquer wardrobe. Now, even though this specific purple color isn't for me, that doesn't matter. What matters is, like I said just a second ago, this is the first time where we've seen color on such a large surface in this apartment, and that restraint was the right move. So I really think this would work better in a more neutral tone because you want your bedroom space to be calming. And if you really need that injection of color in your bedroom, then you could get it through a brighter chair in the corner or a piece of art on the wall. So in my books, this one's a miss because it's overwhelming in a space where you want to be able to relax. Now, I do like the marble headboard they've got here with this really nice blue veining because it feels like more of an art installation than a standard headboard, and also the lighting here on either side of the bed looks good too. It's really soft and minimal, but I can imagine at night it looks great in here. Now, we've also got the same dusty rose curtains in here that we saw in the living room, which is a nice bit of material continuity, and we've already seen this interesting looking stool, which is the chrome plop stool, all over this apartment. We saw it in the kitchen, and we also just saw it right next to the bed serving as a nightstand, and so I don't know if she's got 3 of these stools in here or if they're just moving this one around for photos. But for me, in this corner, I'd go for something more functional because, again, in such a small space, you can't afford to have furniture items that you won't regularly use. And this doesn't look like a comfortable stool at all. And especially in a spot like this in the bedroom, I can't really imagine anyone ever sitting on here. Whereas if you had a more comfortable lounge chair here in the corner, then maybe if you've got guests staying over in the living room for a couple of days, then it might be a nice place to just be able to decompress in your bedroom and have a bit of separation. So the bathroom is kind of in the center of this apartment, and like the rest of the apartment, it's not large by any means. Fortunately, it does have the same 3-meter ceilings and this glass block wall that lets in natural light from the living room, which is good because the bathroom has no windows of its own. And so when you first walk in, the shower is directly in front of you, with the toilet on your left and the vanity on your right. Now for the vanity, they've gone with a similar walnut burl veneer as the kitchen, which honestly looks pretty good. And for the countertop, they've used the same deep green marble that frames the apartment's front door. The faucet is placed to the left side of the sink, which feels a bit awkward to me, but I'm glad they included some storage space under the vanity and some countertop space for your daily essentials. They've gone with this 3-panel mirror with hinged side wings, which is a cool little detail, but the mirror itself looks incredibly small. I'm sure it's set at the right height for the woman who lives here, but for anyone else who's taller or shorter than her, they're almost not going to be able to see their own face. I can imagine a taller man stepping into this bathroom and only being able to see himself from the chin down, which is not really the best bathroom experience. Of course, they're trying not to block too much of the glass block wall here, but in that case, maybe they should have put a larger mirror next to the vanity on the side wall so you can actually see yourself regardless of your height. Also, the lighting here seems to be hanging pretty low too, so I'm not sure if they've got overhead lights in here as well, but it doesn't look like this one is going to light up the room very well, so once the sun goes down and they stop getting natural light through the glass wall, I'm not optimistic about how this room is going to look at night. Now, for the floors and walls, they went with the same white square tiles that we saw in the kitchen, but interestingly, this is the one space where I would have given them the go-ahead to drench the room in color, and I'm pretty shocked that they didn't take the opportunity. I actually just made another video about a home that has exactly this, a bathroom done floor to ceiling in these beautiful dusty blue mosaic tiles. But you can get super creative with the color too. Here's another bathroom that does the same thing in gold, and it looks amazing. So they could have pulled off the same thing in here, which would look so striking with the natural light filtering through these glass blocks, but they went with white instead in the one room where I feel like a colorful surface was warranted. And then there's another problem in here, which is that the shower is completely open. Aside from this glass wall, there's no door or curtain or even a small elevation change on the floor that would prevent the water from getting out. So when you take a shower here, water's gonna get all over this side of the bathroom, including the vanity, and maybe run on the floor out into the toilet area, which, if the floor isn't graded well, could even seep out of the bathroom and into the entryway. I'm sure they probably have the floor angled so the water does go down the shower drain, but when it's splashing off of you when you're taking a shower, you can't stop it from getting all over the place. So I think this looks good in photos, but in practice, this is going to be really impractical. And also, why is the towel hook on this side next to the door? It just means you have to walk over there to grab your towel, so you'll definitely get water all over the room. This is just poor planning. So what can we learn from this home? First, be strategic about how you use color. In most cases, color works best as an accent, not as the main dish, and they got this right throughout most of this apartment. But interestingly, I think the two areas where they got this wrong are the bedroom and the bathroom. In the bedroom, using an overwhelmingly bright wardrobe just kills any sense of relaxation that they could have had in there, and it would be so much better with something more muted. And in the bathroom, this is the one place where they could have gone all out with color, but instead they opted for a white tile that just looks cheap. So if you're the kind of person who loves having color in your space, make sure you're using it in the right areas and in the right proportions so you don't end up with a space you get tired of after a couple of months. But more importantly, make sure every area of your home has utility. They did this perfectly in the kitchen by adding in the breakfast bar, but they dropped the ball in the bedroom by putting this stool in an awkward corner that probably just gets in the way and never actually gets used. So if you want to make some quick upgrades to your own home, think about the areas in your home that you don't use regularly and ask yourself how you can give them utility. Can you change the furniture there so you actually want to spend time there? Can you add a lamp or a rug to make that space more cozy? Whatever it is, the more utility you can give to every area of your home, the more satisfied you'll be living there. So I'm reviewing hundreds of apartments like this one, so make sure you subscribe if you want to see more of these videos. And I've put links to a few other homes that also love color in the description, so if you like to have color in your space as well, I've got you covered. And if you want to see a really cool home that's built entirely around a second level courtyard, check out this video here. It's got that blue bathroom I showed you a minute ago, and a lot more. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the comments.